Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beyond Divorce Online Summit. I am so excited that you are here as we are going to help you to discover the secrets to disconnect, set boundaries, and move forward for you and for your kids. And I am so happy that you've decided to join us today because I am here with Christina McGhee. Hello, Christina. How are you?
Hey, Wendy.
I'm so excited that you are joining us today because so many people tuning in and listening have been wanting to hear from experts around how it is that we can talk to our kids about divorce and how to have those really tough conversations. So I'm really thrilled that you are here today to help us all navigate that process. And before we jump into our conversation, I'm going to share a little bit about you with our audience today.
Okay, cool.
So everybody, Christina is a speaker and a divorce parenting expert who believes that divorce doesn't have to equal devastation for families. While splitting up is undeniably hard, with the right kind of information and support, Christina believes that parents can be children's absolute best resource as life changes. And as a coach with 20 plus years of experience, Christina is dedicated to providing parents with the tools and practical support that they need to get it right for their kids. She is also the author of the highly acclaimed book, Parenting Apart: How Separated and Divorced Parents Can Raise Happy and Secure Kids. Christina, I am so excited to jump into this conversation with you today because having gone through my own divorce and trying to navigate the waters of how to tell my children and how to continue to have difficult conversations with them as I've navigated the process, I'm so grateful for your knowledge and expertise around this topic. And I know that there was a reason that you were inspired to participate today. And obviously, with all of the work that you've been doing, it makes complete sense. But I'd love to hear from you around what it was that inspired you and your story of how you got into this.
Wow, well, that's quite a story. Actually, I come from a divorced family. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. And to be perfectly honest, how it impacted my life was really not on my radar growing up. It was just kind of, that's the way life was. You move forward and move on, and that's in the past. But later in life, when I met the love of my life, he came with an ex-wife and 2 kids. And so I immediately jumped into bonus momdom. And it was
I
like,
love that.
oh, what do I do? So as a child of divorce, I was pretty clear what I didn't want to do, but I wasn't so clear about what I should be doing for these kids in this situation and how did we make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in our early days, we didn't have a great relationship with their mom. We had a very rocky road, and we went through a lot of different stuff. And I knew that if it was hard for me, my gosh, how hard must it be for them? So I started, like any good social worker, digging around looking for resources. And it just so happened that during the time that I was looking for resources, my husband, we went through litigation again, and he was court ordered to attend a 4-hour parenting course. And he came home from the course and he handed me a card and he goes, "You should be teaching this." You got to be kidding me, right? This is not in my wheelhouse. This is not something I do. He goes, "No, really, I think you ought to check it out." We had just moved to the Houston area, and that's where my journey began. I started teaching parents, and I taught classes for over 12 years, and it just kind of put me on a path and a journey that I had never really expected to go on. Interestingly, now many years later, I have a much different perspective. And I'm also realizing that, and this is going to sound crazy from somebody who's a coach, like, duh, you ought to know this, but it just never ends. Because here I am as an adult with my own children, my own family, and now I'm caring for my parents who are divorced, and a whole new crop of issues kind of come up,
Right.
In how you navigate that with your parents, So it's been interesting. It's been really interesting, very eye-opening for me. So I have a personal and a professional interest in this topic. And um, once I got to talk with you, I just fell in love with the idea of being part of this, series, because there's just such a big need out there. I mean, and I really believe that when parents can have access to good information and support as soon as possible on the front end, it makes such a big difference on the back end.
Yes, it does. And, I can tell you not only from my own personal experience, but also with all of the countless people that I've had conversations with, the first thing that everybody says is, oh my God, what is this going to do to my kids?
Yeah.
Right. And, or you stay with your spouse, or you try to work through things because of your children. And ultimately, that isn't always the best decision for everybody. Right.
Right. No, it's not. And I think a lot of parents really struggle with that. Like, is there going to be irreparable damage to my kids?
Yeah.
And it's really natural to have those concerns. But, when you take a look at the research, and they studied kids that were in high conflict families where parents were married and high conflict families where parents were divorced, what they discovered is that kids show the same symptoms.
Mm.
So, really, fundamentally, it's not about the act of divorce, but it's really about how mom and dad, or parents, relate to each other. And that can happen whether you're living in one home or two. Just because you didn't make a good couple doesn't mean you can't be good parents.
Exactly. And I think that what's also, you also hear a lot about the ages of the kids, right? You think it's easier when they're older versus when they're younger. And while,
Mm,
yes, obviously there's, you know, my kids were 10 and 7. My 10-year-old got it a lot more than my 7-year-old did. And I remember, my ex-husband and I both tried to explain it to them in terms that they could understand. But, how do you see best for parents to really communicate with their kids, and especially the ones that are a little bit younger who can't wrap their mind around, what divorce even looks like or means?
right, right. Well, for the littles, it is really hard because developmentally, they can't put it all together. Like, they see things are being different,
Mhm.
and as parents, it's really hard to kind of say that in very concrete terms. So I would say that for really young kiddos, the key factors are going to be predictability and consistency. So, while life is changing, you want to provide them with some constants, so structuring the schedule, having routines, things that they can expect, and also keeping it very simple. So, mom and dad, our family's changed. And parents always ask me, even with really young kids, should you use the word divorce? I think you should, because the truth is that's what's happening. It's important to give a name to it, because they're also going to go out into the world, and so
Right.
you'd want to avoid the confusion. So I think it's best to be clear with kids, use the word divorce, and let them know that our family is changing. And I recommend at any age that parents talk about divorce as a change in a family, because it's not the end of the family, it's a change in a family. So our family's changing. With kids that are a little bit older, when you talk about like your age range, you said you're really struggling with your 7-year-old. A lot of times I tell parents a story about a kid I was working with in group when I was doing children's groups, and he was like an 8-year-old kid, and he was really struggling to kind of wrap his head around what's happened here and why. That was really big for him. So I asked him, I said, hey, can you tell me what's one of your favorite foods? And he said, well, I like pizza, Christina. Pizza's one of my favorite foods. And I said, yeah, cool. I really like pizza too. I said, tell me, what's another one of your favorite foods? And he said, well, I really like chocolate donuts. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I tell you what, how about we have a pizza chocolate donut sandwich? What do you think about that? And he looked at me like I must have been like the craziest lady on the face of the planet. Like, and he really, with a lot of restraint, patience, he said, now, Christina, like, even though pizza and donuts are really good, they're not good together. And I said, well, maybe that's kind of the way it is with mom and dad. Like, when you put them together, they're kind of yucky, not so good. When you take them apart, they can be really great. So for kids, that's a real tangible and relatable way to understand how two good people don't always make a good couple.
That is a brilliant metaphor. I love that. I wish I had that 4 years ago to explain to my kids. No, because it makes so much sense. And now that my kids are older, they verbalize, one is 10 and the other one is 14. And so they even have commented within the last year how much happier they see their dad and I apart than what they saw when we were together. And at the same time, my little one especially kept coming back at both my ex-husband and I wanting to know why, right? Even though
Mm.
we had told him it had nothing to do with them, we still love them. They are still our children. We are still their parents. We love them so much. It was always like, why are you getting divorced? And in my circumstances, there are situations, as everyone, I'm very transparent about my story. I mean, my ex-husband, there was infidelity involved, and
Mhm.
obviously that's not a topic that you tell your kids, but how do you explain to them, like, how do you answer the dreaded question of why are you getting divorced?
Well, I think that one of the really important things is to kind of try and figure out what's driving the train for your
Mm,
kids, because a lot of times what kids are asking us, there's another layer like right underneath the
right.
surface. So when divorce enters the scene, kids start questioning whether love is actually unconditional. If you can stop loving each other, does that mean someday you might stop loving me?
Mm,
Some kids feel like if they can understand what happened between mom and dad, well, maybe I can fix it.
mm,
Maybe I can make it better. Maybe I can change it. I just need to understand why. For other kids, it's just kind of a struggle to figure out, especially, I mean, it depends on the context of what they saw before. Like if they didn't see a lot of fighting, if things seem like they were okay, like what happened here?
right.
So I think when it comes to why, it's best to less is more. Like you want to give them an age appropriate
Mhm.
reason. You don't want to give them too much adult information, but they do need a reason because they need to understand that this had nothing to do with them. And even though you can say that, kids will still question. Maybe if I'd only done this, maybe if I'd only done that. And a lot of parents really struggle. Like when I say that kids sometimes feel responsible for divorce, parents are like, come on, really? I mean, like I've told my kids it's not their fault. Like they get that, right? But if you think about it like a kid, it really makes perfect sense. So when parents are going through the process of divorce and things aren't going so well and they're arguing and they're fighting, what do they spend most of their time arguing and fighting about?
Yeah.
Kids and
Kids.
things that have to do with kids. And
Yeah.
so, in kid thinking, if all these disagreements they're having, if all these problems have to do with me somehow, well, then it must be my fault. And that's tough logic to argue against. It really is. So, I think when it comes down to why, the other thing that kids you need to realize as a parent is that um, there may be no way to satisfy your kids' need to know. Like they
Yeah.
may just really struggle with it and they may need to hear, I know I'm so sorry this is so hard for you. It's got to be really confusing. And you might be thinking that if you had more information, if you understood everything that happened, that it would make it easier. But it's not. This is a grown up problem between, you know, your parents, and there's nothing you can do to change or fix what's happened. And understanding more is not going to make it easier. This is really hard stuff.
Yeah. And another thing that comes up for me, and it just brings me back to when my ex-husband and I told our kids together, had to do with like how much emotion is too much, or is there too
Mm,
much, right? Because I've cried in front of my kids as it relates to their dad and I breaking up. I mean, because it's sad. It's not, it's not like I jumped into my marriage going, woohoo, I'm gonna get divorced one day. It
right.
happens, right? And while my situation wasn't something that I could necessarily, foresee, I did want my kids to see that I was in pain too, that they weren't alone. How much is too much? Or, is that, what is the impact on our kids when they see us having emotion about the divorce?
So I think emotion is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, you need to be responsible with how you manage that,
Right.
because kids need to know that life is going to be okay. And so if you're falling completely apart, that kind of contradicts that message, right?
Right.
So in order for kids to believe that we're going to make it through this, we need to be okay. And that's when we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves, make sure that we're taking care of our own feelings and issues in a healthy and responsible way. And I think that that sets a really good example for kids, because kids are going to follow our lead. So if we are expressing our sadness in healthy and responsible ways, that's role modeling for our kids that it's okay to be sad, and here's some ways that you can handle it, and it's okay to talk about it and have a conversation. So I think that, especially with that first conversation, I think it's important that before you have those big conversations, you shore yourself up first.
Yeah.
Like, again, because you don't want to be in a situation where your kids are all of a sudden feeling emotionally responsible for you. And if kids see you getting really upset, that's what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to take care of mom or dad or whoever they think is emotionally vulnerable. So I think emotions are good, but you want to make sure that you are taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And I would also imagine just also being very careful in your language, right? Because you don't want to throw the other parent under the bus, right? Like I remember always being so cognizant of, he's still their father, he's still their father,
Right.
right? Or vice versa, she's still their mother. And being really, I am so careful in how I speak about their dad in front of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the divorce is between him and I, it's not about the kids. So how can we also be honest with them without throwing the other parent under the bus in certain situations, right? Or just how do we stay really cognizant to not throwing the other parent under the bus, right?
That is such a big issue, because this whole dynamic of the truth kind of
Yeah.
creeps in, and I've had parents say to me, "Oh, Christina, but don't my kids need to know the truth about the other parent?" Well, the truth is a pretty slippery slope, let me tell you, because there's at least two, at a bare minimum, very different perspectives at any given moment about what the truth really is.
Right.
And, kids will come to know their own truth in their own way, in their own time. They'll figure out what's really great about a parent and what's not so great about a parent. And
Mm-hmm.
as you said with your own kids,
Yeah.
as they've gotten older, they kind of figure out that you're happier, living in two separate homes, and
Mm-hmm.
that you're better parents in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
So I think that you just have to be really careful to, it, you don't want to sugarcoat it. Like, if a parent is behaving unsafe or badly, you don't want to go, "Oh, well, that's just dad," or "That's just the way mom is."
Yep.
If you've got a parent that's engaging in unsafe behavior, it's really important that you make sure that kids stay safe. That's got to be a top priority, and that you talk to kids about safety. Not specifically, I would say, about the other parent. So let's say that you have a parent that drinks too much.
Mm.
You may need to have an honest conversation with your kids about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when mom drinks too much, she doesn't make safe choices,
Mm.
and you being safe has to be the most important thing. So right now, this is how you may spend time together, and we hope in the future that that could change.
Right.
But for now, this is the way things are. And so you focus on the problem, not the person,
Mm.
which is really key.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you have to really walk that fine line, between being authentic, because don't say things you don't mean. That's the other that's the other
Right.
problem parents run into. Like, they
Right.
really think the other parent is a total jerk. But they're going, "Oh, mom's so nice, and dad's such a good guy." And kids know, like, they've got BS meters. They get it. That's
Yeah.
not the way you really feel. um, but if you don't have a positive opinion about the other parent, then focus on supporting your child's point of view about the other parent. So when, Devin comes in and he's like really excited about having dad coach his soccer team, you can say, wow, it sounds like you are really excited about dad coaching your soccer team. That must feel pretty cool to have him for your dad. Didn't
Yeah.
have to insert my opinion in there at all, but I could support my child's perspective of their other parent.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love the language that you used around that because, again, you're making it about your child and their relationship, not about yours, because at the end of the day, they still get to have that relationship with their parent. And I think a lot of us don't necessarily think so far ahead, right? We're kind of sometimes like in the heat of the moment, and we're not necessarily thinking that
Sure.
much farther ahead around the implications that our language does have. But what do you do if, like, for example, if one parent isn't doing that, right? And they're actually expressing negativity about you to the children? How do you navigate that? Because it's that slippery slope of
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to put your kid in the middle, but at the same time, you're kind of like, I want to hear more. What else did he say? Right. So how, right. So how do you respond to your kids when they're telling you that that your co-parent is bad mouthing you?
Yeah. So I would say that the top priority needs to be don't give what you get. And if your kids are bringing things for you to you that the other parent is saying and they're trash talking or bad mouthing, don't fight fire with fire, because kids are the ones that end up getting burned.
Mm.
So let's say, for example, that Brittany comes in and she says, hey, mom, dad said that divorce is all your fault. You weren't a good wife. You put on a little bit of weight. You didn't cook very well. You didn't really take care of us. And you never paid enough attention to him. And by the way, dad said, you're not a good mom. We don't have to listen to you. Loaded, right? I mean,
Woo.
whoo, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So you may
Okay.
find that things ratchet up real quick.
Right.
So mom is standing at a crossroads with Brittany, right? Like she has a choice. So mom could take one road and say, oh yeah, well, let me tell you, being married to your dad wasn't really a walk in the park.
That's
So
where you want to
let me give
go.
you, yeah, exactly. So let me really tell you about dad,
Right.
and you can go through your laundry list of all the reasons
Right.
why being married to dad totally sucked.
Right.
You could do that. So what does Brittany do with that information then? Well,
That's a
she
good
goes
question.
right to dad and she says, hey, dad, guess what mom said? And so does dad go, wow, I realized the error of my ways. I probably shouldn't have been trash talking your mom. Oh, no. Dad's like, oh, yeah, really? Well, let me tell you this. And so Brittany gets
Yeah.
more information, exposed to all kinds of things. And what is it? This kid's caught in a no-win situation between two people she loves. Like there's just no way to win in there. And so kids, they may stop talking and just kind of listen and not say anything and take it all in. And they've got to carry that around, or they may become more confused. Their anxiety goes up. It's just not a good situation for kids. So if we back things up and we say we're back at that point where Brittany kind of unleashes all this on mom, mom could take a different direction and she could say, wow, what do you think about what dad said? Sounds like dad was pretty upset with me. Sometimes when a divorce happens, parents deal with their feelings in lots of different ways. And when they're angry, they might say something to, kind of hurt or upset the other parent.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry you had to hear that. Now what happens for Brittany? Well, it ends there, right? So you've given Brittany an opportunity to share with you. You've stayed calm. That's really important. You validated her feelings. Wow, that must be pretty confusing. That must have been hard to hear. I'm sorry you had to hear that. What do you think? You give her an opportunity to talk some more. And then you give her a way to get some emotional distance from it. because it's not about anything that she did or anything you did, but it's how dad's managing his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you have to roll over when like your kids come to you with some information that you don't feel like has a grain of truth in it. You can say, well, I don't agree with what mom said. I don't see it that way. Yeah, that may be the way dad thinks about it, but that's not the way I think about it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that, I've also, I've been in this position before. And, when my son has come to me, sometimes I almost feel like he's what I call like he's baiting me to see if I'll take the bait.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I've responded to him is, oh, well, if that is your dad's interpretation, then your dad gets to have that interpretation. If that was his experience, your dad gets to have his experience. And mine was something different because your dad and I are very different. So I also try really hard to not take the bait, because sometimes as my kids have gotten older, they're getting smarter, and there's times even where my ex-husband and I I'll call him and be like, there's no way that this came up, or this, like, it's like some things I'm just like, really, like, no, there's no way. And like, I'll call him and, my ex-husband is a narcissist. And so he does have a tendency to manipulate truths and lies and things, but there's certain things that I'm like, there's no way he said that. Right. And I'll call him and be like, did you really, like, or how did this come out? And because like, I know what he's hearing is not what is necessarily intended to come out of the mouth. So like, how do the parents even acknowledge or bring that up? Because like, I struggle with that so often too, where it's like, do I call him and say like, hey, this is getting back to me, like, you need to be careful? Or do you just go like this and you're like, okay, I'm just going to handle what's in front of me and how my experience is with them and what they're sharing? Like, how do you draw that line, right? Because part of that is also boundaries that nobody knows how to navigate.
Well, I think it depends on the situation, because not every situation's the same, right? So
Right.
if you have a high conflict co-parent that, is just not willing to be cooperative, you can ring them up and say, hey, this is what I heard, but chances are those words are going to fall on deaf ears. And I appreciate you really bringing up this point, because the truth is, like, our kids will sometimes play both ends against the middle. Like any self-respecting kid, if mom says no ice cream, you make a beeline for dad. And that happens in families where moms and dads are in the same house, and in divorced families when you have two separate houses. But when it's two houses, everything has the potential to be like a lot more intense. So yes, sometimes kids will drop the bomb and share information because they want to see if mom will go off like a bottle rocket.
Right.
Other times it's maybe to get a little leverage, especially when you're talking about things like homework or bedtime. Oh, well, at dad's house, I can watch TV as much as I want, and I can stay up, as late as I want. I don't really have a bedtime there. Really, that's very interesting. Maybe I should give dad a call and we can chat about that. So you might want to call their bluff.
Mm.
Or in a situation where you don't have a cooperative co-parent, when Anthony slides that one out, you may say, wow, well, you know what? In dad's house, dad's rules, his roof, his rules. In this house, however, your bedtime's 8:30, and I do care about what you watch on TV. That's one way dad and I are different.
Yeah.
You don't comment, but see, when those things get tossed out, it just like opens the door for a lot of like, oh, did he? Oh, no, he didn't, and so we just get into this. And what happens is our kids have done a really beautiful job of just totally sidetracking us.
Yep.
Right? We're not focused on bedtime anymore. We're not focused on homework. We're just thinking about what the other parent said.
Right.
So I think you have to gauge it. If you have the kind of relationship where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, here's something that, popped on my radar. Just wanted to mention it. Was something going on there? Or, this is how the kids are interpreting it, and you get some more information. And that's the best case scenario, when you can pick up the phone and you can kind of let each other know. Because the other piece of that is that it's very common for kids to say one thing to one parent and one thing to the other parent, that kids are very sensitive. And so they may say things that they think will make a parent happy,
Yeah.
or that will make them feel better. So if a kid's like struggling with having time at the other parent's home, well, they might be telling that parent, oh no, I really like being here. I would love to be here more. So you have one parent hearing that, and the other parent is hearing, I don't want to go. Like, don't make me. And so who's hearing the truth?
Right.
And that escalates the conflict. So I think when you can clear the air, that's the best case scenario. If you can't, when it comes to bad mouthing or differences, then you really focus on processing that with your kids. Stay real clear about what your boundaries are, what your values are as a co-parent, the rules in your home, and don't allow it to sidetrack you.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And there's so many tough conversations that happen, some on the smaller end and some on the larger spectrum. What are
Right.
some of the other bigger conflict conversations that you run into that a lot of parents struggle with knowing how to handle or even engage their kids in a conversation around?
Ooh, gosh, there's so
I
there's so
know.
many. I mean, there really is. So I think a big struggle for lots of parents is when their kids are really struggling, like they're feeling really sad, they're hurting, and gosh, as a parent, I mean, we just want to get in there. We want to protect them. We want to fix it. We want to take it away, make it all better, tie a pretty bow around it, and you can't. You just can't. There are going to be situations where a parent may disappoint a child, where a child's just really, really sad, where they're having to deal or struggle with a very difficult situation. And as parents, while it may not seem like we're doing very much, one of the best things we can do is really step in there and validate their feelings. And validation is about more than saying, wow, you seem really sad today. It's really digging in a lot deeper and really communicating to your kid, hey, I get this. This makes sense to me. I understand. Wow, this must be so hard for you. If I was in this situation, I might feel the same way. And for a child to be heard, for their truth, those feelings to be validated, it means so much. And there's so many really important messages you're sending your kids when you do that, like that it's okay to talk, that your feelings matter, that what you're feeling is normal and okay, and that I'm here for you. I'm really listening. And so when you approach these tough conversations, I tell parents, don't worry so much about having the exact right words. Just show up, you know, uh, just be fully present in that moment. And if you mess up, if you get it wrong, your kids are going to let you know. If you say, hey, boy, you're really frustrated. No, I'm not frustrated. I'm really angry, or I'm really, oh, okay, wow. I totally missed that, Okay, you're really angry. Tell me about that. What's going on here? Let's talk about it. What do you want to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry about, because none of us get it right 100% of the time, regardless of marital status. You just don't. You like kids don't like they don't come with a little parenting manual going, here you go, read page 21 and you got this down. You don't. It's all trial and error, and every kid is different.
Yeah.
But I think when you can really show up for them in a way that says, you matter to me and you have my full attention, that can be extremely meaningful. And you're also teaching them about how to identify their own emotions and how to manage them.
Yeah. And at what point, like, because I have a lot of clients who, you know, try to do that, right? But they don't necessarily get the information from the kids in a way. And sometimes it's an age thing, right? The younger they are, the harder time sometimes they have around putting language to an emotion. At what point do you, or well, at what point do you as a parent need to recognize that you are not enough for your kids that perhaps they need to go talk to somebody else? Like, how
Uh,
do you know what I mean? Because like my kids went to
mhm.
therapy because it got to a point where I was out of my league with being able to really manage well for myself and manage their emotions at the same time. And I believed for my kids that it was really important that they have a total neutral third party who is not their dad, who is not me, that they
Mhm.
could talk to privately and say things about me and their dad to somebody, you know, that wasn't him and it wasn't me. So how can parents trust when it's time, or to know when to bring in a therapist, let's say?
Right. So when do you know you need help? Right? I would,
Exactly.
yeah. So I would say that you take a look at what kids were like before the divorce and how they're behaving now. If you're seeing big changes in kind of their sleeping patterns or their appetite or their behavior, if they were a really outgoing kid and now all of a sudden they're very withdrawn, if you feel like they're showing symptoms of depression, you know, if you hear kids make statements, and these are the kind of things that shake us to the core as parents, but if you hear your kids say things like, oh, I wish I was never born, maybe things would be better if I wasn't around, you need to take that very, very seriously, because while your child may not have the intention of hurting themselves, maybe they don't have a plan of action, they are sending a really clear message to you that they are not okay. You know, if you have a very toxic divorce situation, you know, there are some divorce situations where kids, despite your very best efforts, are just getting it coming and going. You know, if you have a parent with mental health issues and you don't feel equipped to really have that conversation with your kids about how to deal with that, look for some support. Um, I will say, though, that the vast majority of families, like by and large, most kids don't need counseling. You know, and I know I'll probably get in trouble with some therapists for saying that, but before you take your kid to therapy, I would say take yourself.
Yeah.
Talk with the therapist, tell them what you're seeing, tell them what your concerns are, and get some feedback for a lot of different reasons. One, it may be that with the right support and information, you can make the important changes that your children really need.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can give kids all kinds of skills in the world, but if you're not putting them in an environment that's going to support those skills, you're not really helping them out.
Yeah.
So I would say first do that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, part of why I loved who my kids went to go see was that he was helping me he was giving me tools to be able to better communicate with them and to also feel like I was giving them the space that they needed to accurately communicate their emotions to me. Because I came from a family of poor communicators. I had to learn how to be a better communicator. It's one of the reasons why my marriage also fell apart, is because he and I just didn't talk anymore. And so I knew that I needed help in myself, right? So I went and I was in therapy, and I had a coach, but the kids therapist helped me to better understand how to talk to my kids, because I didn't grow up with that. So I didn't have a
Right.
toolkit to pull from. So I love that you said that, because I do believe in there being a value of, you know, the family dynamic of learning how you all get to communicate in a better way with one another.
Right. And I think when you have the advantage of that and it's a fit for your family,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, that's a great gift to give to your kids. But for a lot of families, because of the financial implications of splitting up, the resources may be far and few between. And there are some parents who may not be able to take their kids to counseling. So maybe you help your kids identify other people that they can talk to. So, you know, because you can be the best mom or dad on the face of the planet, but you may not be someone your kids feel comfortable talking to you, because kids will worry. Like,
Right.
if I talk to you about this, how's it going to impact you? Am I going to hurt your feelings? Am I going to make the situation worse? What's going to happen? So they may need a neutral third person, and sometimes that can be a therapist or counselor. Sometimes it can be a coach. Sometimes it
Right.
can be an aunt or a teacher or a close family friend. You know, so I think that it can be really important to help kids identify who else are safe people for them to talk to? Who can they go to when they're feeling a little overwhelmed, when they don't feel they can talk to mom or dad? And I think that can be really valuable for your kids.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. I think, there is so much value in that. And also for you, I mean, at the end of the day, we also have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves for our kids, right? And that,
Yeah,
in order for us to take care of them, like you said, it's like we get to put our oxygen masks on first, and then we put it on our kids. So, we need to get our bearings too before we can really get to a place where we can also support our children. So
right. And that's so hard to do. It's
it
so
is.
tough.
I still, I'm still learning, right? There's still new emotions that come up. And I think that that's also something that people don't necessarily understand is that, yes, there was information with the divorce, but like, for example, parents sometimes, if there is an affair, like one of the parents will go off and be with the person they had an affair with, or
Hmm.
when there is a divorce, one parent moves on faster than the other, and then somebody new comes into the picture, and then there's a new family dynamic that you're getting used to, right? So it's, divorce is just kind of the first step in what a family how a family, or rather what a family looks like, changes, right? It's a constant evolution. There's going to be a lot of new experiences that none of us have ever gone through before, right? It's not like you said, like you're
Right.
born with a manual. I mean, that would be great if if that existed. I always say, like, if there was a magic pill, I would market it up the yin yang, because that's what everybody's searching for, right?
Yeah, no joke. No joke. But I really believe that divorce becomes a part
Yeah.
of your life. It's
Yes.
not something like, okay, well, we've gone through the stages of grieving. We're done now. We can tuck
Yeah.
this away and we'll be through. It becomes a part of their story.
Yeah.
It's a big change in a family. The family is going to continue, but there are going to be things that will come up, you know? And like you said, somebody gets remarried, somebody moves. Kids they turn 8 and all of a sudden everything seems very different and different things occur to them and they have questions and there's just so many things that can happen. Yet it
Yeah.
could be somebody like me who has aging parents and I was like, whoo, where did this come from?
Right.
It's a part of their story. It's a part of life. And certainly once you've gone through that kind of initial stage of grieving and processing, you get to a place of acceptance. That's like the end goal that we're looking
Right.
for. Um, but by no means are you done. There are just going to be things that are come up. And when those things come up, hopefully we'll all be better equipped to manage them. They won't be as intense as they were in the early days,
Right.
and we can handle them a little bit differently. But yeah, I would really encourage parents the conversations are going to be ongoing and they're going to be things that are going to come up, and some of them are going to be pretty tough,
Yeah.
but you can also use them as an opportunity to really build some important life skills for your kids, because the
Yeah.
truth is things are going to happen in their lives as they grow up and they go out into the world, and you're not going to be able to fix them or change them or make them better, but you can help them build skills that will help them be resilient, that will
Exactly.
help them be healthy individuals that can communicate.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, kids are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. And
Mm,
I always tell them, I always tell my boys that, welcome to life. I mean, life throws you curveballs that none of us see. It's not just, between your dad and I mean, welcome to the real world. I mean, curveballs happen in all areas of
yeah.
our life. And you just, like you said, you just get to build the toolkit from which you get to pull from to be able to manage those situations. But it's not always something that you foresee. It's just not the way life works.
Yeah.
So,
Usually it's not at all.
no, and that's the thing. It's usually the opposite of what you plan for,
Right,
right?
right.
Because we all
Yeah.
tell such great stories, and then it happens a totally different way, right? And then we're so surprised. It's like, well, because things don't
That's
play out the
life.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
welcome to what life is all about. So, oh,
Yep, it is.
Christina, Such great information. I mean, I love, you're such an amazing resource, and I'm
Oh,
so
thank
grateful
you.
for everything you shared today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today that you haven't touched on, that is something important around how to help our kids manage? And
Oh,
I know
yeah.
we could
I
talk for
should
5 hours,
have.
but there's so much more. But if anything has come to
um,
mind.
you know, I'll leave you with this thought. I, there are a lot of things that happen in divorce, in families changing, that we can't fix or change for our kids. There are a lot of things that we can't make any better, right? It's important, though, not to lose sight of the fact that you always have the potential to make them much worse.
Mm,
And sometimes the goal may be just don't make it worse, right? Do
right.
your very best to take care of what is on your side of the fence. Focus on the things that you can control, not the things that you can't control, because there are so many parents out there that are really struggling, and they wonder, um, in this situation, I can't control the other parent. What hope do my kids have? Well, I'll
Right.
tell you that kids will fare far better if one person gets together and is that stable, consistent, loving resource for them than if nobody gets it together.
Right.
So don't lose hope. There's a lot that you can do as one parent, making a difference in your kids' lives.
Yeah. And I think that that's so crucial and important, is that at the end of the day, our kids, I mean, you hope that there's two parents that are, stable and emotionally available, but at the end of the day, you can only control yourself. So you get to strive to be that person for your kids. So I think that's beautiful advice, Christina. Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you
Oh,
so
I've
much for
really
being here.
enjoyed it.
Me too. I loved chatting with you, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your wisdom with everybody today. And I know that you also have a generous gift for everybody tuning in.
I
Did
do.
you did you want to share that with our audience today, and they'll
Yeah,
get access
so
to it?
yes, so I put together a guide on talking to kids, how to handle hard conversations. And so in that guide, there's going to be some tips and some guidelines, some of what we talked about today, and some of the things we didn't, weren't able to fit in. I'll also include what I call a validation cheat sheet, because validation, gosh, if you're going to build any like parenting superpower, validation would be it. Like if you
Mm,
could just get that down, gosh, you would be doing so great. And it takes so much practice, even though it sounds so simple. So if people follow the link, get that guide, it'll give you some good tips. And if you have any more information, or you decide you want to work with somebody one-on-one, I do coach parents by phone, and you're more than welcome to find me at divorceandchildren.com.
amazing. Thank you so much. And everybody, the link to download the freebie is here on the page. And then also all of Christina's contact information is here as well. She's an incredible resource. You just got a tip of the iceberg of what amazing knowledge that she does have. Christina, thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I'm so grateful for you being here today.
Oh, Wendy, it's been a real pleasure. And thank you for putting this together. I just know that it's going to make such a big difference for so many parents.
Thank you. And yes, all of you watching, I hope that you got so much great information. I took a ton of notes here myself. I learned a lot, 4 years post separation and, a couple years post divorce. I learned so much, and I hope that you guys did too. And that ultimately is the goal of every single interview in this summit. So thank you so much for watching and tuning in. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Sending lots of love, light, and joy to you all. Mwah. Bye, everybody.